Searching for a romantic summer getaway? Escape with Rich Girl Summer, the new Audible original from Lily Chu. The exquisitely talented Philippa Soo, returning to narrate her 5th Lily Chu title. This time, Philippa is joined by her real-life husband, Stephen Pasquale. Set in Toronto's wealthy cottage country, aka the Hamptons of Canada, Rich Girl Summer follows the story of Valerie, a down-on-her-luck event planner posing as a socialite's long-lost daughter, while piecing together the secrets surrounding a mysterious family and falling deeper and deeper in love with the impossibly hard-to-read and infuriatingly handsome family assistant, Nico. Caught between pretending to belong and unexpectedly finding where she truly fits in, Valerie learns her summer is about to get far more complicated than she ever planned. She's in over her head and head over heels. Listen to Rich Girl Summer now on Audible. Go to audible.com/richgirlsummer.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
So, of course, there's been the age-old debate. Should you send your kids to college? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into that here. But is there an alternative? What is maybe even a better alternative that turns you into the person that you want to be? My good friend Matt Smith wrote a book about this along with Doug Casey. Doug's been on this podcast before. It's called The Preparation. And he's putting his son through what he calls the preparation. And he writes about, or Doug and Matt both, they write about what the preparation is, what best will help define a young person into the hero they are meant to be. So the book's called The Preparation, and Matt and I discuss it on this episode. I am sending this book to all of my kids, so good luck. I hope you enjoy this episode. I love the concept of this book, Matt, and I think you know I love it. It's very much the choose yourself kind of ethos that I've been writing about.
And it's in your article in 2010 about college, like the 7 reasons, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, this is like, this book that you wrote, The Preparation, is near and dear to my heart. This is exactly what young people should do now instead of, let's say, college or other methods of preparing for life. Like, it's because I was really against college, but I didn't really put as much thought into what you should do instead and how you could, and you do need, a young person, 18 to 22, does need some structure or else it's just too random. And this book, The Preparation, sort of, I would almost say is like the conclusion of what I would have wanted to do if I was to continue writing about the no college stuff. Like, you guys really did an excellent job. And it's you and Doug Casey, who's I've known forever. Doug Casey, I really like him. How's Doug doing?
Doug's doing well. I mean, he's 79, so he's slowing down a little bit, but his mind is not. I do a podcast with him called Doug Casey's Take, and I'm operating on like a 6-cylinder brain at best, and he's still at 12. I mean, so he's awesome.
He's a genius. How about you describe it? Like, what happened that made you go into developing this book, The Preparation?
Well, first off, the first time, this was Doug's idea, not my own. And Doug first pitched me on it 12 years ago when I was visiting him in Aspen, and we were driving from his house to lunch. He said, I want to write this book about becoming a Renaissance man. And I said, oh, okay. And that sounds good. And he said, would you be willing to do that with me? I think, because I could use some help in doing it, but I really would like to see it done. And I said, well, tell me more about it. And he said, well, Matt, the 3 most important verbs in any language are be, do, and have. And I want the book to be about that. And I'm like, can you tell me more? And he's like, well, I haven't really thought about it too much. And so I said, well, okay, I'll put some thought into it. But basically, I brushed him off. And every year or 2 since then, Doug and I are still very close. And
you're kind of neighbors. If you're in Uruguay, he's in Argentina.
Yeah. Well, he's in Uruguay most of the time, to be honest, more often than Argentina. So he's like about a 40-minute drive from where I am.
Wow.
Yeah, we're close. But anyway, he brought it up many times, but I would also hear him say how much of a how much brain damage it caused to write a book and how terrible it was and how you don't make any money doing them. And so I'd hear that side of him, and then he'd say, "Hey, why don't we write this book?" So I was always a firm no until my son at 17 was trying to figure out what to do. And I could see and feel in him his his anxiety and he had this internal drive to that he needed to do something, but he had no clear idea what to do. And so that seeing that in him made me reach back out to Doug and said, maybe let's talk more about this. Like, exactly what did you mean? Like, let's kind of flush this thing out. And so in truth, this is a book that I wrote for my son. And we started the process 2 years ago, and he has been our beta tester, our guinea pig over the last 2 years as we've actually tried it out because, it started off with this very rough sketch from Doug. I mean, a list of essentially activities, occupations, and games that Doug thought a Renaissance man basically ought to be able to do. And so we started with this very thumbnail sketch of something. And of course, that's not nearly enough structure for a young person to really know what to do. So we built it up over time, me sort of coaching him through it as he was doing it and realizing where he was running into trouble, and ultimately ended up here with this book, which is quite highly structured.
Why didn't your son, whose name is Maxim, why didn't your son have the default I just knee-jerk reaction, I have to go to college?
It's because he grew up in my house where I am a college dropout. So I never said, that college is the key to success or anything like that. I never even, I didn't propagandize him really one way or the other on any of it. And so I think it's assumed. And also, by the way, he was homeschooled since basically COVID really got going. And when I got to look at what they were actually doing in school, when I got to see the Zoom classes, and I was like, this is bullshit. So as soon as I got to see that, I started homeschooling both my kids.
That's smart because, as much as also I've been against college, I've been super against high school, but that's a little more tricky topic. Like, people are still religious. Look, people are religious about college, but they're even more religious about, you have to go to high school. Imagine not having a high school diploma. But it's all so bad. Yeah, high school is hell. And people think, that's a good thing. You have to go through hell. No, you don't. It's much better to be excited and learn things and do things. And maybe you can explain, I like be, do, have, but I really understand do the most, which is you have to do things to learn things.
Yeah. Well, let me explain Doug's concept with this. It says, have is what basically everyone thinks about. They want to have more money. They want to have a great job. They want to have a beautiful wife. They would like to have a new car. They want to have, and especially in the social media world, I think it's been amplified extensively. It's all about have. And so everyone's natural orientation, mostly because we look at the crowd around us, is toward have. And what people don't understand is the fundamental idea that having is a byproduct. It's a consequence of doing. And doing is really what the book is all about. Doing is the operative. I mean, doing is the point where a young person, especially, you think of the college age person, where they have unlimited energy, where they are open to novelty, where they're willing to try almost anything. My son's like me, he's kind of an introvert, so it kind of makes it hard to get over starting a lot of new things. That is a burden you have to overcome. But definitely the doing is the key to the having, and you have to focus on the doing. However, the most important is the being. That is the only one that actually really matters. And I think most people don't actually seriously consider that question maybe their entire life. But we propose the question very early in the book and really make this a big thing for people to keep in the back of their mind is we want them to focus on becoming the man they want to become, first and foremost, rather than being focused on how am I going to be able to pay the rent in the future? What job do I need to do that? Which is all of the options that are available today, joining the military, going to trade school, or going to college. Those are all things that theoretically get you a job that then gets you an income that makes it so you can survive. This, I have no doubt that you will have enormous options available to you, and it's structured so that there's skills of economic value that are learned along the way that you could be hired to do many, many things that are talked about in the book and directed to do. But you probably won't choose to do a career in any of those because, you know how Scott Adams has this thing of skill stacking?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we basically ours is it's the same as that. It's cycle stacking. It's in these quarters that people go through. They learn these very specific and very different skills, and when you add them on top of one another, they do remarkable things for you. They open up your world to all of the opportunities that really are available to you, and so, but we want people to be oriented toward being. We want them to understand that concept. That's what matters most. And frankly, that's one of the things that's most motivating to a young man. I mean, you want that hero's journey.
And but by the way, you say young men, but this applies to young women as well.
This book is written for young men, but I'm not saying it wouldn't work for. I have a 17-year-old daughter who's at the same stage now that Max was when we started this. So I have the same problem to solve with her. But this book is written because I have an intuitive understanding, because I lived it, of the anxieties, the fears, the hopes, and the motivations of a young man. And so it's geared toward them specifically to speak to them in a way that they'll understand specifically. We will be doing a girl's version of it, but no doubt a girl could do this and she'd kick ass. I mean, no doubt about it. It just might not connect to her in the same way.
I think abstracting away from the specifics of the cycles that you had Max goes through, anybody, because even for a man, there might be different things. And I wanted to ask you about this. Like, how catered is this towards your son versus if somebody else was a little different than him? Maybe they didn't want to do one of these things, but wanted to do something else. Could they fill it, or their personal code had different aspects? How much can you abstract away and make your own version of the preparation?
Well, one of the chapters is how to build your own cycle, because truthfully, we could only choose. We're looking at it like we're competing with college, so 4 years,
Yeah.
theoretically. Although most, it's not everybody graduates in 4 years, but so imagine 4 years, and so there's 16 cycles. Each cycle is a quarter each, so could only be 16, but there really are infinite options to choose from, and certainly some will call to people that we have, for sure, and others won't. And, so we want them to want to show them. I would advise someone to start with one of the ones that we have. One, just because the structure is so useful in getting you momentum and going through things. But probably doing 2 or 3 would be a good idea. But certainly it could be a whole variety of different things. The important thing is to teach somebody that they can learn all this stuff on their own, that they can learn more than they could in a university, because the best classes from some of the best professors alive are available for free or almost free online. And so, they can get this. So that's part of it too. They're getting that academic portion as well. I mean, Doug was really, very, really important to Doug not to slack off on any of that academic stuff as well. So that's stacked in there too, along with these really hands-on things that gives a young man a way to understand the physical world around them and how to shape it. And I think, and it goes into more abstract stuff like investing. There's a whole cycle on investing, and there's a cycle on entrepreneurship. So it gets into the things that are a little more complex and abstract, but certainly could be adapted.
Take a quick break. If you like this episode, I'd really, really appreciate it. It would mean so much to me. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast. Email me at altucher@gmail.com and tell me why you subscribed. Thanks. I wish during my years of those ages, from 18 to 22, I had learned anything from what you're describing in the preparation. I learned zero of that. And A, learning any one of those would have made for great stories. B, like you said, being aware of the physical world, being able to do things that are challenging and hard as opposed to continuing to take tests, which you've done all your life. Like, I've told my experiences about college before, but I went to a top college for computer science, went to graduate school for computer science, and then my first job programming with computer science, programming computers. I was so bad I had to take remedial classes to catch up to my colleagues. And that's ridiculous. I went to a top graduate school for computer science where all I did was programming, and yet somehow in the real world, I couldn't even program at a remedial level. And that's all I
That's
learned in
crazy.
college.
Wow.
So, so I wish, so one of the first things you had Max do was basically establish a personal code. So what does that mean?
Well, this is where you get to the B part. And, I hate rules of all kinds. I really do. I hate rules, except for the rules that I have for myself, that I establish for myself. And I think these rules are very important because it's actually, there are these little things that we do that maybe the rest of the world might not see. But when we do them, they make us feel small. It could be, it could be anything. But when we do it, we feel like less. It doesn't make us feel proud of ourselves, essentially, by doing these things. So it's kind of identifying these things, these lines for yourself and saying, I'm not going to do that thing anymore. I'm gonna draw a line in the sand here. And that is the beginning of self-esteem, actually, is actually getting some control of yourself and being able to say, this is not for me. This makes me small and I want to be bigger. And so I'm not going to do these things. And that personal code, it changes over time. It will evolve over time. But I think thinking through these things that make you feel small when you do them or when you experience them and deciding consciously to stop doing them, it starts to establish this beachhead where you start to become something of your own, of your own creation.
And so, like, what's an example of some of these rules that you or Max has set for you guys?
Well, one of mine is I treat everybody with respect, always. That's what I do. I always act in good faith, always, until I understand I'm working with somebody who's acting in bad faith. But I always go first in good faith, 100% of the time. For Maxim, it was about, things about what he would do with his time. There was certainly things like, I don't want to say all of them, but, certain things that he would be afraid of people because he was an introvert. You wouldn't think of him like that now, actually, at all. But he would be, when we'd have people come over, he would want to go hide, and not want to even be seen by them, And he realized that was not good for him. And his reason for doing that was like fear-based. And it wasn't like, it didn't make him feel good about that. So kind of drawing a line in the sand and being like, no, I can go greet them and say hello and go do my thing and not feel like I need to go hide. So things like that. I mean, these are, it could be, maybe it could be bad habits that you have. It could be people who have porn addiction, watching porn. It could be people that drink and they know they drink too much. It could be bad habits like that. But it's just essentially setting a baseline standard for yourself when, based upon an internal look at yourself and realizing when I do these things, I feel small.
And I think actually, yeah. And look, I think people like to think of themselves as honest and good people. But I think when you actually almost physically write them down, like, this is my code, it really cements it in the brain. I think it is valuable to go through that process.
Yeah, I don't feel good when I lie to somebody. So I'm not going to do that anymore. Instead, I'm just going to tell them I don't want to go. I'm not going to say I'm busy on Friday. Sorry, I can't attend. I'll say, no, I'm really not up for it, but maybe next time. I'm just going to tell them the truth. And it's actually easier, but you have to actually, and you don't have to, this, like, living in with these little deceptions in your life is a thing that makes you feel small.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do that. And so, yeah, I think it's super important. And it's the beachhead of starting to establish yourself as your own person that you're choosing to be, rather than just kind of going with the flow of things. It's the beginning of you taking control of your life. So that's the first part, is just this set of rules. The second part is things to aspire to that encourage you. Like, I go back to of course, partially influenced by Doug, to, Roman and Greek virtues. Like having courage, being a good host, things like that. These virtues of, being kind to people or whatever, but like having some standard that you hold yourself to that you'll never perfect, but is absolutely worth pursuing constantly.
Is it necessary it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to have courage, but is there a way to practice courage so you actually build that muscle?
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and in this book, you have to, because especially it takes someone like Max, and actually I would say this is true for everybody. If you go into these new environments to learn totally new things for the first time, you feel like a retard. You feel embarrassed, if nothing else. And so it takes a lot of courage to show up, on day one for
Sure.
any of these things you're doing. And so you end up having to practice it that way. But I think defining these virtues, and thinking them through and thinking why, because there are tons of to choose from. We just kind of lay out what were the standard ones in ancient Greece and Rome, and we say which ones call to you, like which ones, sound like that's good, like yeah, that feels good to be like that, and then write those down as those, choose those to pursue, and then to consciously look for ways to act in that way. And you'll always fall short. I mean, the virtues are something that it's a pursuit. I mean, I think you could always be more courageous. You could always be more hospitable. That's one of the virtues. But there are things to aspire to. So you have a set of rules, and you have a set of aspirations that are the basis of your being. And then from there, what you do is you stack on capabilities, skills, like things that you learn how to do. As I know your journey that you've been going through with chess. I don't know if you're still pursuing that now, like you were. It's things get harder when you get older. It's weird,
It is. Your brain changes, but that's okay. We'll go moving on.
But so like with that, I had taught him the very basics of chess. I'm no good whatsoever, but I wouldn't say he's a good player by the standards that you understand, but he's competent at this point because he's practiced, and it's something he can he can play a fair game, and he had a good coach along the way. It was someone that you may know, actually.
What's his name?
I don't know if I want to say his name on air, actually, just in case. He's a very private person, but it's someone related to someone else we've talked about who we also know. Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But anyway, so he's very good. I mean, very good. So he did get some assistance from him, in his practice, but mostly it's practicing on the computer, as you know, trying to learn. And he spent many hours as part of his routine over the last couple of years trying to establish that. But so that competency comes to the list. And also, shoeing a horse and flying a plane and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You start adding these competencies, these actual skills. He's an EMT. He's actually done more in 2 years than I'm telling you most people do in a lifetime already.
I mean, it's so amazing. Could you imagine, instead of taking some bullshit like calculus class, you learn how to fly a plane? And that's, calculus is something, there's a 1/1,000,000th chance you're ever going to use it in life. Flying a plane, whether or not you fly a plane later on in life, the skills you have to learn to fly a plane are so valuable. And just again, as a story, like, oh, I have a pilot's license, that's a great thing to say.
Yeah, and that's part of it too. I mean, one of the things, and I opened the book with a handwritten letter to the readers about Doug. And this is the truth about Doug, is that you remember the Dos Equis commercials about the most interesting man in the world. And my friends behind Doug's back would joke, that's Doug. And it's only a joke because it's true. Because Doug has done incredible things in his life. I mean, things that you wouldn't even imagine, he's done them. And
I just remember, so Doug Casey, I've known for a long time as well. I remember in 2016 or 2015, one of those years, we were having dinner, and Doug said to me, let's go find a tiny island nation in Micronesia and convince them to switch completely over to crypto. And that was in 2016. And just that was such a great idea. I was all in, I wanted to do that idea. And, of course, we drifted our different ways, and that never happened. But he always had interesting things going on.
Well, and
doing.
He and I together went to Palau several times and worked very hard to convince the government there to reform under Doug's, to basically turn it into the next Singapore or Hong Kong. And we got so close with that one. We got so close. But that was one of the adventures I had with Doug. And it was his personal hobby, is going to these countries, meeting with the presidents and doing these things. In fact, in October, we're going to Azerbaijan to meet with the president. And Doug is getting an honorary doctorate, so I'll have to refer to him as Dr. Casey from now on, apparently. So,
By the
I
way,
mean,
people don't realize that if you go to a small country, you can just tweet out to the prime minister and they'll meet you.
yeah, it's incredible, actually. It's shocking. I mean, it is incredible. So, yeah, Doug is the most interesting man in the world. And, one of the things that by living an interesting life, doing interesting things, having interesting skill set, it opens up that alone, the reputation of that opens up opportunities for you. And so building a reputation as somebody who's competent and also virtuous, I mean, it opens doors that no college degree could do. That's for sure.
So in this 4-year plan, of which Max is halfway through, and it's divided into cycles of 3 months a cycle, what are the things that Maxim, your son, is now doing and has done?
Okay, well, he got his. So I have to say, first of all, we did not have this clear structure when he started. It was very, you got to understand, this was made through experimentation, where we finally came up with a very clear cycle structure. So it's not as clean for him, and especially in the first, I'd say, 9 months, as it would be for somebody who's starting off today. It was a real breakthrough when we came up with this simple idea of the cycles. It seems simple now, but it was. But anyway, so the first thing he did is he got his EMT license, and basically it makes him so if someone has an injury, he can help. I mean, he could work on an ambulance. He could do that work. Not to say that's what he wants to do, but it's a real skill. I mean, having someone around who knows what to do when something terrible happens is a godsend. And so he's got those skills, and he actually then parlayed those skills. So he spent the following summer actually fighting wildfires in Oregon as an EMT, making $600 a day.
Oh my gosh.
I made, when I was in the Army at that age, and I think my take-home pay for a month was that much, I know the dollar has disintegrated since then, but still, I mean, it was shocking. So there are, the program, we talk about learning how to fly, that's extremely expensive. It's the most expensive cycle of all of them in here, for sure. The entire cost of the program, when we add it all up, it's basically the cost of 1 year at a prestigious university. That's basically the cost of it. But it's something that you can work your way through. You can not, unlike college today, you can't work your way through college. You can work your way through this. And I think, Max's weird example of this one thing with EMT, the opportunity they got to do with the wildfires. I mean, there were people he worked with that literally is the only job they have. They work during the summer doing that, and then they just screw around for the rest of the year because they make enough money during the summers. So he's done that. He worked as an apprentice to a gaucho on our cattle ranch for 3 months, learning everything from all the nasty work of working with the cattle, all the good work of working with cattle, shoeing horses, taking care of all the animals, doing all of that stuff. That was one of the things he did during the cycle.
And had he kind of put himself in your hands and said, "Look, Dad, I'm going to just do what you tell me to do"? Like, did he rebel at all and say, "Oh, I want to go to New York City and meet girls" or anything like that?
He didn't, but it was, coming up with the cycles was like a collaborative process with him, I mean, I wanted it to work for him. But it's not like he was excited to do the EMT thing, because it's like, why? What's the point? Why would I really even want to do that? But I'll tell you, he's quite proud of his skills from that he got from it now that he's done it, And I think this is the way most young people have no idea what they want to do. And they think that they're going to figure it out when they go to college, and maybe they get cornered and they ended up having to pick a major eventually, but they still don't know what they really want to do. And so knowing that, what we try and do is give them the clear structure of here's what you can do, and it will benefit you if you do these things. You will walk away far better off. And certainly as they get further along, especially, adapting it, I think can make a lot of sense. If they want to specialize in another area, or there's another area they have a passion for, it makes sense to pursue. But, most kids don't really have like this passion for something already to start with. They're looking, they're searching, they're trying to find the thing to be excited about. And so what they need to do is get out there in the world and engage with it, and really intensely. And when they do, they'll start to learn what they love and what they hate, and what they're more curious about. And then they have the opportunity to pursue those things.
And so what are some of the other things in these 3-month cycles?
Well, we've got one where you go to the Shelter Institute, which is in the Northeast, and you learn how to design and build a home. in 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And which is
That's great.
I mean, I wish I had that. I mean, I every one of these I wish I had, okay?
I
Every
have a
one of
hard
them.
time plugging things into the, outlet, let alone figure out anything that's actually involved in building a house.
Yeah, and when you have contractors come over and, you never even know, are they ripping you off or what? Like, you don't even know what's happening, right? Yeah, because you just have no knowledge of the space at all. You just kinda have to trust and hope that it's gonna work out okay.
I mean, the other day there was a contractor and he needed to come in and find the air conditioning. And I had no idea. And my wife was somewhere in the house. I had no idea where my wife was. And he just kept asking my questions. Well, could it be in this room? Could it be in this room? And finally, the guy literally said to me, okay, can you please introduce me to the man of the house? And I had to find my wife to get him started. So I don't know
Yeah,
anything.
I understand. My wife kinda runs the household here too, so I understand. So that's one of them. There's one of them. The one he's doing next actually is the entrepreneurship cycle which starts like at the beginning of next month. And so he's going to the business he's going to do is a precision agriculture business using drones here in Uruguay. We live in a place that's good for it. He's not here. I mean, he's here about half the time because he's off doing other things the rest of the time. But he's going to be here for this next quarter. And essentially, it's actually pretty amazing what you can do with these things because you do this like multispectral mapping of the land, and it can define what areas need more nitrogen, and what the pastures which should be seeded and which not. And it can be you scan it with the drones, and then you deliver it with the drones. So instead of tractors, it's
So,
amazing actually.
so how will he get customers?
Well, there are lots of local ranchers around us for him to go to. And the value proposition is really pretty easy to sell. So, but certainly this is something he's going to have to overcome, like actually going out and selling
Yeah.
this himself and selling it in Spanish, which he had to learn. And he learned along the way as one of the things in the cycles. So yeah, it's going to be a good experience for him. I mean, we'll see. 3 months it's a really short time to kind of, get a customer and make a sale and get something that could turn into something bigger if you devoted more time to it. But the process he'll have to go through coming up with the concept of the business, figuring out a way to generate customers and delivering a product, crunching that into 3 months, it can be done. And in that process, there's all kinds of learning that takes place, whether the business ends up being something he carries on or not.
This is probably the one area of all the cycles where I do have some experience. And I think 3 months is an ideal time. Like if he doesn't figure it out in the 3 months, probably not a good business idea for him. So,
Yep.
like you should be able to, particularly for a service-oriented business, which this is, if you can't get a customer in for your service in 3 months, it's not for you.
Exactly. It's not going to happen. I agree. I mean, I'm a serial entrepreneur like you, so I felt exactly the same way about it. I mean, this is easy. You can, you have to, and even if you choose poorly and you fail, you will learn a lot by
Oh yeah,
trying.
you'll learn a
Yeah.
lot.
I mean, I failed plenty of times. I mean, I've had, you have some wins, you have some losses. That's
Yeah.
how it goes.
So okay, so there's entrepreneurship. Do you want to
Yep.
describe some of the other cycles?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple more. So the one he's doing after that is he's going to go to Thailand, and he's going to study Muay Thai for 3 months. There are one school. It's got 2 different locations, one on the beach, one in the mountains in Chiang Mai, and it's a pretty intense thing. It's a pretty intense school where he lives there, but he'll have time to do other stuff while he's there as well. And of course, there's still baked in academic stuff that he'll be doing and reading stuff that he'll be doing during that time period as well. But all these cycles have themes, and this is an important part of the whole thing I think I should explain, is that we tried as much as possible to tie the academic part to the theme of the overall cycle and the reading that you're doing so that they made sense together. Because, the way we typically learn in school is they give you all these disparate facts, and it's like it's just a memorization thing, and if you have great memory, like you can kind of maybe piece most of these still together, but you still don't really understand the timelines of history, and it's kind of vague. But when you do things under a theme, you learn things in this theme. You kind of form a lattice work that allows you to start to build real knowledge and understanding of how all these things connect together. So as much as possible, we tried to tie the academics and the reading all within the cycle theme. So And of course, there's plenty of like elective stuff, room where they can add their own things, and we give them options. Plenty of options they can choose from for that. But yeah, and one other one is a cooking school. There's one of my favorite cities in the world is Florence, and they have this great cooking school there. You go, they teach you how to cook great Italian for a month. And I should say the anchor courses often are not 3 months, 3 months. Like the building a house thing is 3 weeks. So, but each cycle has one major anchor activity in it. Sometimes they're shorter than others. So this cooking school, for 1 month, you live there in Florence. You have mandatory Italian classes along the way, of course. I mean, it's part of the school, it's part of the requirement. And you learn to cook. And I think you ought to, Doug believes, you ought to be able to cook a few good meals. I mean, you should, it's something someone should be able to do. So, plus the experience. I mean, part of this thing is there is that we don't have any rite of passage in our culture. We don't really have there's no hero's journey. You see all these young men that feel so lost today. It's because they've never had anything that says where they go from being a boy to a man, And part of that is seeing the world, but with a purpose. It's not just about going and wandering and backpacking around Europe or Southeast Asia, which there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem with that. But when you go with a purpose and you come back with skills and you come back different, it's a totally different experience.
I mean, I'm so jealous of your son because and you're right to call it the hero's journey, because what I've told recently to my stepson is that when you're making a decision, part of you has to wonder, out of all the biographies you've read, is this sort of decision someone would make if 30 years later, someone is going to write a biography of you? And just going to like college with another 30 million kids or however many, that's not going to be a special, unique decision that differentiates you. And like you say, just memorizing a bunch of facts in textbooks and even writing some essays about those facts, those aren't going to be the way a biography is going to start about you. But the kind of thing your son is doing, or anybody who follows the preparation, these are stories. This is what makes someone, a hero, is by learning these skills. I can't do any of these things. I can't cook. I can't build a house. I can't save a life. I don't speak Spanish. I can't speak any other languages, and I can't fight. So just as every cycle you mentioned, except entrepreneurship.
Chess, well, the activities, there's other activities. That's not a cycle, but it's one of the activities in there that we encourage people to do. So you're damn good at that. So,
well, chess is good because it's a microcosm of learning something very hard. Like chess is a very hard game to be good at, and you have to learn in a very structured way a lot of information. And you have to learn how to learn. Like you said, you can't just memorize it. You have to learn the ideas of it to be good. And you have to learn kind of on both sides of the brain. You have to be able to calculate things on one side of the brain, and you have to think in terms of ideas on the other side of your brain. So it's very difficult. So I like it for that. But like, for instance, if your son was time traveled 1,000 years into the past, or let's even say 50, like he ended up in 1000 AD in England, he could probably survive, and I can't. Like he could probably have skills that are useful in 1000 AD. I don't know. If I just ended up in 1000 AD, they would kill me instantly. I'm useless. Like if you were put into 1000 AD in England, what would you be able to do? You can't build a light bulb. You can't give them electricity. I can't do that.
Yep.
What can you do?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And and here's the other, I think, equally important question. We are right now going through something akin to the Industrial Revolution, where the future is going to be so vastly different than what, you and I have grown up with AI and what's happening with that. What will you do then? So many, I mean, I just read, there were 3 articles last week in the mainstream media and on the Wall Street Journal. One of them at least was in the Wall Street Journal, another one in the New York Times, talking about all these recent college grads in computer science, actually, who can't get a job. I mean, they're offered a job at Chipotle, I mean, it's crazy. And so,
I mean, Google and Microsoft are firing thousands of programmers because AI can is really great at coding now.
Yeah, to use the metaphor of I guess it was technically the second industrial revolution, when it really hit America, white collar jobs today are the equivalent of the small scale farmer in the 1880s. I mean, the vast majority of the population, the 57 or so percent, was farmers, and now it's white collar jobs. And today, 1% of people are farmers. And I think white collar jobs are going to be wiped away faster than people can imagine because of AI. And most of the jobs that you look at, I mean, Microsoft put out saying these are the top 40 most at risk, just the other day, you might have seen that. But the list is long. And actually, the most common degree in America is actually business administration. I don't know if you knew that. But
which is a useless degree.
With AI, it is vastly more useless. Vastly. And so those people are going to be in serious trouble. I mean, we have the people who are in college now are going to have real trouble. The people who recently graduated are experiencing some of that trouble. The world is going to be different in a decade from now. And the question is, are you going to be the kind of person who can survive in that world as well? Just like going back to 1100, I think this question that's more pressing. Certainly being able to build a house is a good, but it's really about having a whole stack of skills that are applicable across the spectrum of things that need to be done. Because, we're going to have, everybody is so super specialized now and everything, right? The thing about being super specialized is that it makes it easy for automation. Once a job is specialized, automation can do it. But being what I would consider an expert generalist, and you've got a lot of knowledge, you've got a broad knowledge about a lot of things, that you'll still be useful to tie these things together, to tie the specialization together that will be automated through AI.
Well, also the benefit of learning semi-deeply a lot of things gives you an ability, again, to learn how to learn. So, learning how to be an EMT is very different than learning how to cook. And yet, you start to develop this muscle of adapting from one learning environment to another. And that meta learning how to learn is very valuable. In college, all the learning is very structured. It's very the same. It's like, read this book, hear this lecture, take this test, repeat. So you don't really learn how to learn. You just learn that method. And whether it's, we don't know yet if it's a good method or not. No research has ever been done. And so, what he's doing, even if he forgets how to cook some recipe, he's building this ability and this courageousness to step into a new environment and face the challenges and learn new things. And that's so valuable in this environment we're going into. He doesn't necessarily need to learn, how to do the best prompts on ChatGPT, because that's going to change. Like, that's irrelevant. But learning how to go into an environment and conquer it is important. And you simply don't learn that in college. And it's a sad thing because people in college think you do.
Yeah, you do not. You really don't. I mean, I think college is I'm a dropout. So, I can't say I know from personal experience the whole thing, what it's all like. I only went for, I dropped out after 3 semesters. But basically what I saw when I was there was that, 80 to 90% of the time was just hanging out.
Yeah.
Of one form or another, which is fine, I guess. But it's kind of what, I had this desire to go. Like, I wanted to run, like, show me like something worth pursuing, something I could like I wanted to do something. I wanted to be somebody, I wanted to make something happen. And this was it just was like putting me on ice, I felt, and it didn't work. And by the way, you will make friends wherever you go. You don't have to it's not just, you don't miss out on the college experience by not being in college.
This is totally my point.
The
like, people say, you go for the social experience. You mean to tell me if I sent a kid somewhere other than college, they would not make friends? Like, of course they're going to make friends. Like, that's what kids do.
I know, it's retarded. It's one of the dumbest ideas. And it's one of these things that people just say like automatically without even thinking about it, as if there's no other option. The other thing, that one major problem with college is that you're surrounded, just like all of school, you're surrounded only by your peers.
Yeah.
And frankly, your peers are at least as dumb as you are typically. They don't know anything about the world. You're probably not going to pick up good habits from them. They're not going to they're not going to, well, you can have great conversations and a lot of fun with them, but they're not going to like help you in any way. In fact, they lock you into this sort of weird thinking that you kind of end up mirroring each other. And I think this is a huge problem in our society today is that there aren't good intergenerational relationships. In fact, if anything, there's this, the anti-boomer crowd and the boomers that shit on the young people. And I think it's so crazy to me because I've always had the most important relationships in my life have always been intergenerational. They've always been that way. And one of the key reasons for that is that I could see that like the people around me were fine, but they didn't have anything. They didn't have what I wanted to have. They didn't know what I wanted to know. There wasn't anything there wasn't anything to gain, I mean, there was no wisdom there, that's for sure. I mean, the relationship I have with Doug, clearly an intergenerational relationship. I mean, it's like I get to talk to Socrates like 3 times a week. I mean, you know what that's like? I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And I've always had relationships like that. And I have relationships going the other way too, where, most of my employees are millennials or younger. I love those relationships. They're really good. And with your peers are your competition. And so in a way, it's like they're your buddies, but they're also like against you, especially if you start trying to climb a career ladder, right?
Right.
It's like, you got to push them out of the way. But what young people don't realize is that older people, when they see somebody who's got some ambition and some drive and, some integrity and desire to do stuff, like we want to help them. Like we actually want to help, and we like it. It's natural for us. And you're not going to get that from your peer group in the same way. First of all, they can't help you in the same way. And second of all, it's like, well, yeah, but what will it cost me? Because there really is real competition there, what it might cost them, if only in status, if you're end up being more successful than them. Those things really exist. And, people who are wiser than you, more experienced, more successful, I mean, you're never going to be in competition with them. They don't look at you like that. They look at you for what you could be and give you little tests sometimes to see if that's what you might become, and you build relationships with them that way. So
after these 4 years of 3-month cycles are finished, what happens then in the preparation? What happens after you're prepared?
Yeah. Well, I think it remains to be seen exactly what happens with Maxim, obviously, because he's only 2 years into it. He's already been given opportunities he could pursue if he wanted to, where he could make a living. But again, making a living is not the goal. The goal is to become the man you want to become. But I imagine that it'll be much like it's been for me as an entrepreneur, that you start to see the world full of opportunities. And you see all the different things that you could do to make money. If you need money, it's easy. I mean, there are plenty of, I know when you do 10 ideas a day, that whole thing you were doing for a long time, write down 10 business ideas, no problem. Because you've learned to think about the world in that way.
Right.
And so this will prepare them to look at the world in that way. And I think that there will be opportunities thrown their way, actually. So I don't worry about that at all. And if nothing else, they'll be certified in real skills that actually can offer them a job that they could do at any time.
I rarely get envious of anybody else, but I'm envious of your son's opportunities right now. Like, it's such a great thing that he's going through this. I wish I had, back in the, 80s, 90s, it was hard to make that kind of decision to not go to college. And I really wish I had had enough sense of myself to say, hey, obviously you hadn't written the book, The Preparation, yet. It's just being written now. But I wish it had been there, and I wish I had done something like this, because I'm not regretting my life, but I think it would have been very interesting to have a background like that, to go through 4 years of going to cooking school in Italy, Muay Thai and boxing in Thailand, working a farm, and on, like all the things that he's doing now is such an excellent A, set of stories, I keep repeating that, but B, just a way to learn about life and a way to kind of pass those 4 years that are so instrumental to becoming an adult and then really figuring out what you do. Like, I mean, most of the things I've done in my life after college had nothing to do with what I learned in college. And
Of
that's always
course.
going to be the case.
Of course. Yeah. But no one tells kids that. They don't know. And they're really presented with only three options. Really. There's only three viable options, I think. I mean, I guess there's the dead end job, kind of option. So maybe there's four. But it's the military, it's a trade school, which like people like Mike Rowe have made a lot more, been pushing hard to make popular. And there's nothing wrong with those things. I mean, they are more likely today to lead you to a economic stability than a college degree is, I think. But I don't think that they solve the core problem, which is helping you become the man you want to be. And I think that is what we are most missing. That's what I see when I see young men who are lost, and I encounter them all the time. It's that. They haven't figured that out yet. They haven't started even the basic discipline of the personal code and saying, I'm just not going to do this. I'm not going to be a kind of person who does these things. I'm going to choose this way instead. They haven't even begun that process yet. And I think I didn't even consider that question until I was 30. I talk about it in the book, and my personal, it took tragedy for me to get to the point where I actually was like, holy shit, what's going on here? Where, I started to really question that. That question became of key importance to me. But if you get that early, when you got that energy, and honestly, you've got no liabilities in life yet. You are free to do just about anything you want. It's an amazing opportunity. And I have to say, Doug is highly educated. Went to Georgetown. I'm a college dropout. Both of us wish, like you, that we had this and did this instead. I mean, we really do. I don't regret my life at all, but it would have been a gift if I had something like this for me.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful idea that to reinvent those 4 years. I think it was Naval Ravikant who told me once college, and I never fact checked this, I just believe it, but he said he was telling me colleges in the Middle Ages / Renaissance is when they started, and every kids 18 to 22 would be sent to college, and there were guards at the college, but the guards were facing in, meaning they didn't want the kids to escape the college. And it's because this was right after the Crusades. And look, the reason the Crusades happened is they wanted to send the 18-year. These are the most violent demographic of any society is the kids 18 to 22 years old, the men 18 to 22 years old. So send them away for those years in the Crusades. Or now, okay, there's no more Crusades. Let's send them to college. But the guards were facing in to not let the kids out, not to protect the kids. And, it's the same thing now. It's just kind of like this placeholder of what do we do with these, potentially violent individuals who don't have a sense of risk yet. Oh, okay, we'll send them to college. People don't realize that's the outcome. And then you look at the past 60 years. Why, you mentioned, Mike Rowe, who's been on this podcast, and trade schools. Why was there such a big marketing frenzy about sending your kid to college? Well, you trace the money. This is when the government started backing student loans. So everybody was making money except the kids. The college presidents were making huge amounts of money because they could keep raising tuitions faster than inflation. It was backed by the government, and the government was making money because you're paying interest to the government. And so it was this giant, marketing scam. Yeah. And
totally. And now these kids are so screwed. And these kids, basically, if you factor in a little bit of opportunity cost of money you could have earned instead of going to college, just even if you just took a dead-end job, if you factor in that opportunity cost plus the cost of college, plus the likelihood you're going to be taking on some debt and the servicing of the debt, the median cost is like $300,000.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the median net worth of an American family.
Yeah, and kids
it's crazy.
Kids don't develop the part of the brain that really learns how to measure risk until they're about 25 years old. So, of course, sell these loans to kids. Parents have a hard time saying, don't do that. And, it's just a cycle that's really bad. It's part of the reason for inflation and part of the reason for that young people now can't afford to live. Like, kids can't afford to live in New York City, for instance, which is the city you want to live in if you want to work in many industries, or they can't afford to live in any major city. It's very sad now what's happening.
It's terrible. These kids have gotten totally screwed, and then they made it so you can't discharge the debt. So it's
Yeah, you can't declare bankruptcy against the debt anymore.
nope. They'll take it out of your Social Security. You don't pay it your whole life, it'll come out of your Social Security. I mean, there's no way out of it. It's actually insane, and it's basically you're setting yourself up for indentured servitude. You really are. You get a job, you get in your career, and you don't. It turns out not to be what you want. But at this stage, once you've gone through college, you figure that out. Well, what choices do you really have? You've got this big payment you got to make every month for your rent that you had to go to live in the place where the job was. You got this big bill for your loans that you got to pay every month. I mean, now your choices of what you can do, you can't take risk anymore because you got to make sure you're making that monthly nut now. So you're trapped in that gig and you're stuck, and you're lucky to have it at this point. Because they're cutting so many jobs, and that's only going to get worse, I think, with the economy and with AI. So, yeah, it's crazy. And thank you, have done such a great job of discrediting college, and it took a long time, but people are starting to wake up to it. I mean, if this book would have been published even 5 years ago, I do not think it would have had the same impact. But I think people are really waking up to the idea that this thing doesn't make sense anymore. The whole thing.
I hope your book's a bestseller. I'm going to send it to, I have 3 stepkids, 2 kids. I don't like to say stepkids. I have 5 kids. And I'm going to send this book to all of them. Even though they're all in their 20s now, they all still could use the preparation. Like, I'm going to tonight write down my personal code. I've never actually written it down. So it's worth thinking about. And again, putting something on paper, because then that helps you. It reminds you of these things that are important to you. And it's more cemented when you write something down. That I've learned 100%. That a lot. And
and one thing, and obviously this book was written specifically to deal with the challenge of my son at that point where he's entering college. But it's very clear to me that this is not something that has to be limited to people that are at that age. One, I think people who are younger could definitely do a lot of it. I don't know if you know, but you can get your pilot's license before you can get your driver's license.
Yeah. So, I used to, when I was doing stand-up comedy, I used to have a joke related to the fact that rather than binge watching, in half the time it takes to binge watch Game of Thrones, you can get 2 pilot's licenses. So
exactly. So it's not limited where you have to be 18 to do it. You could do it younger. And I wish, I'd thought of these things sooner, so we could have started the homeschool stuff we were doing more like this earlier. It would have been better for him. But I also think that, when people, if they're a little further along and they haven't found their way yet, I think it could be the answer for them too. And I have, I was talking to somebody the other day, and he goes, I think it'd be good for somebody who's in a midlife crisis. And I said, well, yeah, I guess it would. I mean, if you're really at that stage where you're like, I really don't know what to do, and you've never really had that rite of passage. You've never really you figured yourself out. Like this process, you will figure yourself out.
That's really interesting. It also makes me think, the word retirement is a modern word. Like people never really retired before. This could be good for someone who's entering that phase of their life where they're not as focused on career. Their family's grown up and out of the house. Maybe it's a good, I wouldn't mind, in a few years going to cooking school in Italy, going to learn boxing in Thailand and working on a farm. Keeps you young, these things.
I agree. And learning new things is really critical. And I mean, with myself, I can tell you, watching my son has inspired me to try harder and do new things because, I have this, what Buffett calls, your circle of competence, these things that I'm good at, I'm known for, they're very easy for me to do. I'm better at some of them than, almost anybody. And you tend to stay there in that circle where you're really good. And I think that I think that's a gigantic mistake. And seeing him and all the new things he's doing, it's inspired me to do new things. Like I started taking a Python course. I've never been programming in my life, but I figured, why not? So I'm going to learn some basic Python. I don't know. Where is it going to go? I don't know, but I'm going to do it. It's
well, look, also, you wrote a book. You wrote this book.
I would say that's part of it too. And honestly, that was you are a prolific writer. You're a great writer. It was very difficult. Did not come easy to me to do this, and it was quite challenging, the entire thing. So
But it's good, and maybe because you had this new angle on, like I only have the PDF. I know I'm supposed to get the book today, actually.
Yeah.
But I can tell you spent a lot of time on interior design as well. Like it looks beautiful.
The hardback.
Wow. Okay, I never saw it.
And it's big. It's big because it's there are things that there's part of it that's like a workbook. Okay, I did what I could to make it as beautiful as possible within the limits of Amazon. Okay.
Yeah.
And there are limits. I don't know if you've ever held any of the Stripe press books, but Stripe actually has this separate publishing division where they publish some books that I guess the founders of Stripe like, and they're beautiful books.
Oh wow, I never even heard of that.
Yeah, they're amazing.
I'm going to try them.
And just go to stripepress.com, I think, and you can see the ones that they have, and they'll have some that they'll sell on Amazon too. But they're gorgeous books. Someone gave a shit about trying to make it beautiful. And so the way I thought of it is, most kids, when you give them a book, when you send anyone a book, you're sending them a burden, right? It's like, hey, read my book, or read this book. It's like, you want 8 or 9 or 10 hours of my life? I mean, come on. But I wanted it so that when it got in their hands, and really only the hardcover, the full color one really does it in the same way. And it's more expensive because it's expensive to make. When they hold it, I am convinced that they will know that they've not held a book like this before. And they will begin to flip through it, and it might draw them in. And you see even our weird use of these QR codes so that, it's like we talk about a news article, and then they can scan it and go to the news article, and they can, we try to incorporate like a interactive design in it as well, just so that it would make it different than anything they saw before, because the content is totally different than anything they've seen before. It's an attempt to lure them in, essentially, by making it beautiful.
Well, you've done a great job. This is a great concept. It was a well-done book. I'm excited about trying to think in this way for myself, like what new things I can do, and to kind of, teach myself skills I never thought I would learn, even at this age. And like I said, I'm going to send this to all 5 of my kids and any other kids I could think of. And look, we haven't spoken in a long time, about almost 9 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
So I appreciate catching up with you, and what a great way to do it. What a great book. I'm glad you came on the podcast. And The Preparation by Matt Smith and Doug Casey. Doug didn't come on the podcast. I was hoping to see Doug as well.
Yeah, Doug would love to come on with you. He loves you, and he would love to come on with you. So invite him specifically, yes, because he would love to talk to you.
Excellent.
Definitely.
All right, I'm going to do that. And Matt, let's keep in touch. Thanks again for coming on the show, and a great book, The Preparation.
Just when you thought summer couldn't get any hotter, Pluto TV is turning up the heat with thousands of free movies. Presenting Summer of Cinema. Stream your favorite blockbuster films like Gladiator,
I will have my vengeance.
Good Burger,
This is what I call fast food.
Beverly Hills Cop, The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, and Julie and Julia.
Bon appetit.
All for free on your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized, so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.